Rain hammered the courthouse windows in Birmingham, Alabama, the night Evelyn Carter decided to break the law. Outside, thunder rolled across the empty streets while television crews crowded the courthouse steps. Inside courtroom 3, 48-year-old federal judge Nathaniel Brooks stared at a frightened 12-year-old boy sitting beside two armed marshals. The boy's name was Caleb Mercer. Thin shoulders, bruised wrists, eyes far older than 12 years deserved. Reporters called him the miracle witness because he survived a massacre connected to one of the South's most dangerous criminal networks. Prosecutors called him essential. The newspapers called him broken. Evelyn called him abandoned. She stood near the back wall, organizing legal files nobody would read before morning. At 62, Evelyn had worked 30 years as a courthouse clerk. Most people barely noticed her anymore. Grey hair tied neatly behind her neck, worn cardigans smelling faintly of coffee and paper dust. Soft voice, careful movements, the kind of woman entire systems quietly depended upon. Judge Brooks removed his glasses slowly. His expression carried exhaustion deeper than age. Caleb would enter federal protection immediately. New identity, new location. No surviving relatives had agreed to custody. Temporary placement would continue until permanent arrangements appeared. The courtroom remained silent after those words. Caleb lowered his head. He already understood what adults meant when they said temporary. Temporary meant disposable. Temporary meant nobody planned to stay. Evelyn watched the boy carefully. Something inside her chest tightened painfully. She recognized that look. 30 years earlier, she wore the same expression inside Chicago foster offices after her father disappeared into prison. The hearing ended after midnight. Marshals escorted Caleb toward a holding vehicle parked beneath the courthouse garage. Evelyn gathered abandoned paperwork while cleaning crews mopped the marble floors. She should have gone home. Her small brick house waited 20 minutes away near an old railroad district outside Birmingham. Empty refrigerator, leaking kitchen sink. Silence. Instead, she walked downstairs. The garage smelled like gasoline and cold rainwater. Caleb sat alone on a metal bench while agents argued nearby about transportation delays. Nobody noticed Evelyn approach until she offered the boy a paper cup filled with hot chocolate from the courthouse vending machine. Caleb stared suspiciously. "It tastes terrible," Evelyn admitted gently, "but terrible chocolate still helps during storms." For the first time all evening, the boy almost smiled. One marshal sighed heavily while checking his phone. "Foster placement fell through again," he muttered toward another agent. "Kids heading to Montgomery tomorrow unless Nashville opens a bed." A bed, not a home, not a family, just another bed. Evelyn felt anger rise quietly beneath her ribs. She remembered social workers using identical language about her younger brother before he vanished into state facilities. Bed availability, risk assessment, behavioral adjustment. Nobody mentioned loneliness. Nobody mentioned terror. The older marshal finally noticed her. "Ma'am, garage access closed 20 minutes ago." Evelyn nodded politely. Then she asked the question changing every life inside that garage. "Has anyone asked the boy what he wants?" The marshals exchanged tired looks. "Doesn't work that way," one answered. Evelyn looked directly at Caleb. "Young man," she said softly, "if it did work that way, what would you ask for?" Caleb hesitated. Rain echoed through the concrete structure above them. Somewhere distant, thunder cracked again. Finally, the boy spoke. "I just want somewhere nobody gets hurt because of me." The sentence nearly destroyed her. Because children should never speak like that. Evelyn swallowed carefully. Her house carried unpaid bills stacked across the dining table. She survived on courthouse wages and small retirement savings. The roof leaked above the guest bedroom. Her arthritis medication already cost too much. But she also knew something else. Loneliness kills children slower than bullets. She turned toward the marshals. How temporary would temporary custody be? One agent laughed quietly. "Ma'am, this isn't regular foster care. The cartel behind this case murdered 6 witnesses already. The kid needs federal protection." Evelyn looked back at Caleb, bruised wrists, tired eyes, a child trying desperately not to exist too loudly. She made her decision before fear could interrupt. Then he can stay with me until you figure something better out." Silence flooded the garage. Even Caleb looked shocked. The older marshal studied her carefully. "You understand what you're offering?" Evelyn nodded. Actually, she understood more than they realized, because 27 years earlier, another frightened child connected to another violent case vanished from this same courthouse system, and Evelyn Carter never forgave herself for letting him disappear. By sunrise, Birmingham looked washed clean by the storm, but Evelyn Carter felt anything except clean. She sat at her tiny kitchen table, staring at 2 mugs of untouched coffee, while Caleb slept upstairs in the guest bedroom beneath a patched ceiling. Temporary. That was the agreement federal authorities approved at 3:30 that morning after endless paperwork and reluctant signatures. 48 hours maximum. 2 days until secure placement became available somewhere outside Alabama. Evelyn already knew 48 hours could change everything. Her house stood on Willow Creek Road, near abandoned rail lines and rusting warehouses converted into thrift stores. Small homes crowded close together, peeling paint, uneven sidewalks, people surviving quietly beside each other. Caleb woke around 8. Evelyn heard footsteps pause near the staircase. Careful footsteps, suspicious footsteps, the kind belonging to children trained by trauma to expect danger behind every corner. "Kitchen's this way," she called gently. The boy appeared wearing oversized sweatpants she found inside old donation boxes at church. His blonde hair remained damp from the shower. Bruises colored the side of his jaw, yellow and purple beneath morning light. Evelyn placed scrambled eggs before him. Caleb stared at the plate. "You allergic to anything?" she asked. "No, Mum." "Good, because I already burned the toast and refused to restart breakfast." Again, that almost smile appeared. He ate cautiously at first, then faster. Children who survived unstable homes always revealed themselves during meals. Evelyn learned that years ago volunteering at Birmingham shelters. Some children picked nervously, others inhaled food before someone removed it. Caleb inhaled. Outside, freight trains groaned through the district while neighbors prepared for work. Evelyn watched the boy carefully without making him uncomfortable. "Federal agents said you testified in court," she said quietly. Caleb froze. Wrong subject. Evelyn immediately regretted mentioning it. The boy lowered his fork slowly. "I wasn't supposed to survive." His voice carried no drama, only fact. Evelyn reached across the table carefully. "You survived because God wasn't finished with you yet." Caleb looked unconvinced. Before she could continue, knocking exploded against the front door. 3 sharp hits. Authoritative. Caleb flinched violently. Evelyn stood immediately. 2 federal marshals waited outside beside a black SUV. One introduced himself as Deputy Marshal Victor Hayes. Tall, broad shoulders, military posture. The second remained near the vehicle scanning the neighborhood. "Routine security inspection," Hayes explained while entering. His eyes moved through every corner quickly. Windows, locks, street visibility. Escape access. Evelyn folded her arms. "You inspect every foster home like Fort Knox." Hayes didn't smile. "This isn't foster care anymore." The sentence chilled the room. Caleb stood silently near the kitchen doorway listening. Hayes finally addressed him directly. "Any unusual vehicles near the house? Anyone following you?" Caleb shook his head. Hayes relaxed slightly. Then he handed Evelyn a folded document. Emergency relocation procedures, confidentiality orders, threat assessment warnings. The cartel connected to Caleb's testimony operated across Georgia, Alabama, and Louisiana. 2 prosecutors already received death threats. 1 witness disappeared near Mobile 3 weeks earlier. Evelyn finished reading silently. Then she looked directly at Hayes. "You brought a child into court against monsters without protecting him first?" The marshal's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, with respect, you don't understand this situation." Evelyn's expression hardened. "No, you don't understand children." The room fell silent. Hayes studied her differently after that. Not like an old clerk anymore, like someone dangerous in another way, someone unafraid. After the marshals left, Caleb sat on the porch steps watching passing trains. Cold November wind carried the smell of wet metal and distant factories. Evelyn brought him a blanket. "You really shouldn't keep me here." he whispered. She sat beside him slowly. Why? Caleb kept staring forward. Everybody around me gets hurt eventually. There it was, the real wound, not bruises, not nightmares. Guilt. Adult-sized guilt, trapped inside a 12-year-old boy. Evelyn wrapped the blanket tighter around his shoulders. When I was 14, she said softly, my younger brother blamed himself after our father went to prison. Thought he ruined our family somehow. Caleb glanced toward her. Did he? Evelyn smiled sadly. Baby, children don't destroy families, adults do. The words settled heavily between them. That afternoon, Evelyn took Caleb grocery shopping because her refrigerator contained almost nothing except expired yogurt and mustard packets. Big mistake. The moment they entered Patterson's Market, conversation slowed. People recognized Caleb from television coverage, recognized Evelyn too. Mrs. Linda Grayson from church approached carefully beside the canned soup aisle. Evelyn, she whispered nervously, that's the witness boy, isn't it? Evelyn answered calmly, his name is Caleb. Linda lowered her voice further. Honey, people are saying dangerous men could come looking for him. You live alone. Caleb pretended not to hear while staring at cereal boxes. But Evelyn saw his shoulders tense immediately. She faced Linda directly. Then people should pray harder instead of gossiping louder. Linda stepped back embarrassed. Still, whispers followed them throughout the store. By evening, half Birmingham probably knew Evelyn Carter brought a federal witness into her home. And somewhere beyond Alabama, someone else heard the same rumor. Late that night, while Caleb slept upstairs, Evelyn noticed headlights parked across the street. Dark sedan, engine running, watching the house. The car remained there for exactly 12 minutes, then disappeared into the rain. Evelyn barely slept after seeing the sedan. Every creak inside the house sounded sharper. Every passing engine outside slowed her heartbeat. She sat beside the living room window until nearly dawn, holding an old baseball bat she found in the garage 15 years earlier. Ridiculous weapon, still comforting. Around 6:30, Caleb entered quietly wearing socks and one of her late brother's oversized sweatshirts. You stayed awake all night, he said. Evelyn forced a smile. Welcome to old age. Sleep becomes optional after 60. The boy looked unconvinced. He noticed the bat immediately. Neither mentioned it. Rain continued falling across Birmingham through the morning. Grey clouds pressed low over rooftops while local news stations replayed courtroom footage connected to the Mercer cartel trial. Caleb avoided television entirely. Instead, he sat at the kitchen table sketching inside a cheap notebook Evelyn bought during yesterday's grocery trip. Careful drawings. Buildings, street corners, faces without eyes. Trauma always leaked somewhere. By noon, Deputy Marshal Hayes returned unexpectedly. This time, he arrived alone. His expression carried tension, immediately alarming Evelyn. We need to talk privately, he said. Caleb stiffened near the hallway. Evelyn crossed her arms. You can say it here. Hayes hesitated before lowering his voice. One of the defendants posted bond through a shell corporation yesterday evening. The room turned cold. Caleb's pencil stopped moving. Hayes continued carefully. His name's Rafael Navarro, former military contractor connected to the Mercer operation. Intelligence suggests he's looking for missing testimony records. Missing testimony records, not witnesses. Records. Evelyn noticed the distinction instantly. You think someone believes Caleb kept evidence, she said. Hayes nodded once. We searched every recovered property after the murders. Something important never surfaced. Caleb's face drained completely. Evelyn saw it happen, saw fear transform into recognition. The marshal noticed too. Caleb, Hayes said carefully, is there something you haven't told investigators? Silence, long silence. Then the boy stood slowly. I need my backpack. Evelyn retrieved it from upstairs while Hayes remained motionless near the kitchen doorway. When she returned, Caleb opened the bag carefully and removed a small flash drive taped beneath the inner lining. Hayes cursed under his breath. Jesus Christ. Caleb's hands shook violently. My mum hid it before the shooting, he whispered. She said never trust anybody wearing expensive shoes. Even Hayes almost smiled at that. Almost. What's on it? Evelyn asked. Caleb swallowed hard. Names, accounts, politicians, judges, police. He looked toward Hayes nervously. My stepfather recorded everything because he planned escaping the cartel. The marshal took one slow breath. This changes everything. No kidding. Within 20 minutes, federal vehicles surrounded the block. Agents entered carrying equipment cases and encrypted phones. Neighbors watched nervously through curtains while rumors exploded across Willow Creek Road. Evelyn's quiet little house suddenly looked like a war zone. One female agent escorted Caleb upstairs, while technicians secured the flash drive inside protective containers. Hayes remained in the kitchen, speaking quietly into his phone. Evelyn overheard enough. Corruption, federal exposure, political fallout, high-level arrests. Then one sentence changed everything. If the leak reaches Navarro, Hayes muttered, the kid won't survive transport. Evelyn stepped closer immediately. What does that mean? Hayes looked exhausted suddenly. It means somebody inside the system already failed him once, maybe twice. The honesty surprised her. Before she could respond, shouting erupted outside. Two black SUVs stopped hard beside the curb. Not federal vehicles. Men stepped out wearing dark jackets and expensive watches, too polished, too calm. Hayes reached for his weapon instantly. Get upstairs, he ordered. Evelyn ignored him completely. Instead, she moved toward the front porch. One man approached calmly through the rain. Hispanic, mid-40s, scar beneath one eye, cold expression carrying military discipline. Danger rolled off him like heat. Hayes followed behind Evelyn, furious. Ma'am, move back now. The stranger stopped at the bottom step. His voice sounded strangely polite. We're not here to hurt the boy. Nobody believed that. The man removed leather gloves slowly. My employer simply wants property belonging to his organization returned peacefully. Hayes drew his weapon. Instantly, agents across the yard did the same. Neighbors screamed from nearby porches. Rain hammered harder. Evelyn studied the stranger carefully. Then she noticed something strange. The man kept glancing toward Caleb's upstairs window. Not like a hunter, like someone checking whether a child remained safe. What's your name? Evelyn asked unexpectedly. Hayes looked at her like she lost her mind. The stranger hesitated. Mateo Ruiz. Mr. Ruiz, Evelyn said calmly, if your employer murders children, then he deserves prison. Mateo's expression flickered painfully. Pain, not anger, that mattered. You don't understand who controls this case, he answered quietly. Evelyn stepped closer, despite Hayes trying stopping her. No, she replied softly. You don't understand what happens when frightened people finally stop running. For one strange second, silence settled between them. Then Mateo looked directly toward the upstairs window one final time and whispered something nobody expected. Tell the boy his mother tried protecting him. He turned immediately. The SUVs disappeared into the rain seconds later. Federal agents remained frozen across the yard. Even Hayes looked stunned, because hardened cartel soldiers usually delivered threats, not apologies. Upstairs, Caleb stood beside the bedroom window trembling, and for the first time since entering Evelyn's home, he began crying uncontrollably. Caleb cried for nearly an hour. Not loud, not dramatic. The kind of crying children develop after years learning silence keeps them alive. Evelyn sat beside him on the bedroom floor while federal agents moved through the house downstairs. Radios crackled constantly, phones rang without stopping. Somewhere outside, helicopter blades echoed above Birmingham. The world suddenly cared very much about one frightened boy. Too late. He knew my mother, Caleb whispered finally. Evelyn handed him tissues quietly. Mateo Ruiz. Caleb nodded. He worked security for my stepfather, but he always brought me comic books when Mom got sad. Caleb stared toward the rain-covered window. He warned her before the shooting, told her people inside the organization planned betrayal. Evelyn listened carefully. Trauma scattered memories like broken glass. Children remembered strange details adults overlooked. Comic books, warnings, expensive shoes. The pieces mattered somehow. Downstairs, Deputy Marshal Hayes argued loudly with someone over the phone. I don't care who authorized transfer orders, he snapped. The leak's internal. Nobody moves the witness until I confirm clearance personally. That sentence terrified Evelyn more than cartel threats, because corruption inside systems always destroyed people faster than criminals outside them. By evening, agents relocated Caleb and Evelyn into a federal safe house outside Huntsville. The property looked ordinary from the street. Small white farmhouse, fenced backyard, pine trees surrounding narrow country roads. But hidden cameras covered every angle. Motion sensors lined windows. 2 armed marshals rotated patrol shifts overnight. Caleb hated it immediately. "Feels like prison," he muttered while unpacking. Evelyn understood. Children surviving violence often confused safety with captivity. The safe house carried strange silence after dark. Rural Alabama nights felt different from Birmingham. Crickets echoed through wet fields while distant thunder rolled above empty highways. Evelyn couldn't sleep again. Around midnight, she found Hayes drinking coffee alone at the kitchen counter. Without his suit jacket, he suddenly looked older, tired, human. "You got children?" Evelyn asked quietly. Hayes stared into his coffee. "Had a daughter." His voice remained flat. "Cancer, 8 years old." Evelyn's chest tightened. Some grief never softened. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Hayes nodded once. "After she died, my marriage followed 6 months later. Work became easier than empty rooms." Evelyn understood that too well. For several minutes they listened to rain against the windows. Then Hayes reached inside his coat pocket and placed a photograph on the counter. 3 men, 1 senator from Louisiana, 1 federal judge from Atlanta, and Rafael Navarro. Evelyn recognized the senator instantly from television. Senator William Denton. Patriotic speeches, military charities, presidential ambitions. Hayes lowered his voice. "The flash drive connects Denton to Mercer money laundering operations through offshore accounts." He looked toward Caleb's closed bedroom door. "If this becomes public, half Washington burns." Evelyn studied the photograph carefully, then she noticed something colder. The judge standing beside Denton was Nathaniel Brooks, the same federal judge handling Caleb's case. Hayes saw recognition spread across her face. "Exactly," he said grimly. Evelyn felt sick. The courtroom, the transfer orders, the leaks. Everything suddenly connected. Someone powerful wanted Caleb moved before testimony reached federal investigators. Someone inside the courthouse system. At 2:13 that morning, alarms exploded across the property. Red emergency lights flooded hallways. Marshals shouted downstairs. Hayes grabbed his weapon instantly. "Safe room, now!" Evelyn rushed upstairs toward Caleb's bedroom, while tires screamed outside across wet gravel. Gunfire erupted seconds later. Real gunfire. Violent, close, windows shattered downstairs. Caleb bolted upright inside bed, breathing hard. "What's happening?" "Shoes on," Evelyn ordered calmly, despite terror flooding her body. "Move, baby." The safe room hid behind a false wall inside the laundry room. Tiny space, reinforced steel, emergency supplies stacked against concrete walls. Hayes pushed them inside while other marshals exchanged fire outside. "Nobody opens this door except me," he said. Then he disappeared back into chaos. The sounds outside felt endless. Explosions, shouting, glass breaking, engines roaring. Caleb trembled violently beside Evelyn. She pulled him close immediately. "Listen to me," she whispered firmly. "Look at my face." He obeyed. Barely. "You survived before. You survived tonight too. Understand?" Tears streamed down his cheeks. "People die around me." Evelyn grabbed both sides of his face gently. "No," she said fiercely. "Evil people choose violence around you. That's different." Outside, automatic gunfire rattled again. Then silence. Terrible silence. Minutes crawled by. Neither moved. Finally, heavy footsteps approached. A coded knock sounded against the steel door. 3 short, 2 long. Hayes's voice followed. "Clear, open up." Evelyn released one shaking breath. The attack ended. But when the safe room door opened, Hayes's expression told another story entirely. One marshal lay dead outside near the kitchen, and Judge Nathaniel Brooks had vanished before federal agents reached his home. The farmhouse smelled like gunpowder and blood by sunrise. Federal agents moved silently through shattered rooms collecting shell casings while emergency lights painted the walls red and blue. Rain finally stopped during the night, leaving Alabama cold and painfully quiet. Evelyn stood near the kitchen doorway, wrapped inside a wool blanket. Across the room, paramedics rolled a covered body toward an ambulance. Deputy Marshal Eric Sloan, 34 years old, married, 2 daughters. Dead because corrupt men feared a frightened child carrying truth. Caleb watched from the staircase. His face looked empty now. That frightened Evelyn most. Children eventually stop crying after enough trauma. They become quiet instead, numb instead of loud. Hayes spoke with investigators near the broken front window. His voice remained controlled, but fury sat visibly beneath every word. Inside access codes were compromised, he said. Attackers knew safe room location and shift rotations. Evelyn crossed her arms tightly. Meaning somebody informed them. Hayes nodded once. Again. The realization poisoned everything. No judge could be trusted, no courthouse, maybe no agency either. By mid-morning, Washington officials ordered immediate relocation outside Alabama. Secret transport, new identities, new witnesses, protection protocols. Caleb overheard enough during hallway conversations. He cornered Evelyn while agents packed equipment downstairs. "You're not coming with me, are you?" There it was, the real fear. Abandonment always arrived eventually. Evelyn touched his cheek gently. "Nobody's getting rid of me that easily." But she wasn't certain. Federal protection programs separated civilians constantly, especially older civilians with no legal connection to witnesses. Hayes entered carrying folders. His expression answered her fears immediately. "Orders came through," he said quietly. Caleb looked away before hearing the rest. Children learned disappointment faster than adults. Hayes sighed heavily. Witness transport leaves within 2 hours, only authorized personnel permitted afterward. Silence flooded the room, then Caleb nodded slowly, too calmly. "Okay," he whispered. That almost broke Evelyn. Because children expecting abandonment hurt differently than children fighting it. Hayes looked uncomfortable suddenly. "Kid, listen." "It's fine," Caleb interrupted. "People always leave eventually." He walked upstairs before either adult could answer. Evelyn turned toward Hayes, furious. "You couldn't say it differently?" Hayes rubbed exhausted eyes. "You think I enjoy this?" "No," Evelyn snapped. "I think you forgot he's 12. For several seconds, neither spoke. Finally, Hayes lowered his voice. "The cartel placed a $2 million bounty on anyone connected to the testimony. Judges disappeared. Marshals died tonight. If they learn you stay involved, they'll target you too." Evelyn stared directly into his eyes. "Then they should have met me before I got old and stubborn." Hayes almost laughed. Almost. Instead, he handed her an envelope. Temporary authorization forms, emergency guardian clearance, travel identification. Evelyn blinked. "What's this?" Hayes looked toward the staircase. "Officially, your impossible paperwork. Unofficially, the kid trusts you more than anybody alive." He shrugged tiredly. "And I'm done watching systems fail children." Emotion hit her unexpectedly hard. Not because of the papers, because grief-stricken people recognizing each other created dangerous loyalty. 2 hours later, convoy vehicles headed north through Tennessee beneath dark winter skies. Evelyn sat beside Caleb inside an armored SUV while Hayes drove silently ahead. Snow flurries drifted across interstate highways as news stations exploded with breaking headlines. Federal Judge Nathaniel Brooks missing, corruption investigation expanding, Senator Denton denying criminal ties, witness protection failures questioned nationally. The entire country suddenly watched their nightmare unfold. Around dusk, the convoy stopped outside Nashville for fuel. Caleb remained unusually quiet. Evelyn bought him hot chocolate from a gas station diner. Terrible chocolate, still comforting. When she returned outside, she found Hayes standing beside the vehicle studying distant traffic. "You trust me yet?" she asked lightly. Hayes surprised her by answering honestly. "I trust you more than most federal judges right now." Then his expression darkened. "But something's wrong." Evelyn followed his gaze. 2 motorcycles waited near the highway entrance. Black helmets, engines running, watching. Her stomach tightened immediately. "Cartel?" "No," Hayes murmured. "Military posture, too disciplined." Before either moved, Caleb suddenly exited the SUV. "That's him," he whispered. One biker removed his helmet slowly. Mateo Ruiz. Rainwater glistened across the scar beneath his eye. Hayes reached for his weapon instantly. Mateo raised empty hands. "If I wanted the child dead," he said calmly, "you wouldn't see me first." Nobody relaxed. Traffic roared across the interstate while snow drifted harder overhead. Mateo stepped closer carefully. Then he delivered the sentence, changing everything again. "Senator Denton ordered the farmhouse attack himself, and he's already inside the witness protection network." Snow covered the Nashville highway shoulder while engines idled beneath gray evening skies. Mateo Ruiz stood motionless beside his motorcycle, facing 3 armed federal marshals. Nobody trusted him, probably wise. Hayes kept one hand near his weapon. "Start talking," he ordered. Mateo glanced toward Caleb first. The boy looked terrified, but strangely relieved at the same time. "Senator Denton controls half the witness transfers moving through southern federal courts," Mateo said calmly. "The farmhouse attack happened because your transport details reached him within minutes." Hayes's expression darkened. "You expect me believing cartel intelligence now?" "No," Mateo answered quietly. "I expect you surviving long enough to verify it yourself." Snow drifted harder across the interstate. Truck headlights blurred through freezing wind while tension wrapped around the group like wire. Evelyn studied Mateo carefully again. Dangerous men usually enjoyed fear. Mateo carried regret instead. That mattered. "Why help us?" she asked softly. The question seemed to wound him. Mateo looked toward Caleb before answering. "Because his mother saved my life once." His voice lowered further. "And because I helped destroy hers afterward." Silence followed. Caleb stepped closer unconsciously. Children recognized truth faster than adults sometimes. Hayes finally motioned toward an empty diner parking lot beside the gas station. "5 minutes," he warned. "Then I decide whether arresting you matters more than shooting you." Mateo almost smiled at that. Inside the nearly empty diner, fluorescent lights buzzed softly above cracked vinyl booths. A tired waitress refilled coffee nobody touched. Mateo spread photographs across the table: bank transfers, political fundraisers, private airfields. And one horrifying image: Judge Nathaniel Brooks entering a private jet beside Senator Denton 6 hours earlier. Alive, escaping, Hayes swore quietly. "Denton's moving assets before indictments land," Mateo explained. "Judges, prosecutors, witnesses, anyone connected becomes disposable." Evelyn looked toward Caleb. The boy stared silently at the photographs, like someone watching nightmares become real. "My stepfather worked for Denton too," he whispered. Mateo nodded slowly. "Mercer handled money laundering operations through Louisiana shipping companies. When your mother discovered children were disappearing through trafficking routes, she tried taking evidence to federal authorities." Pain flashed briefly across his face. "Wrong authorities." Evelyn felt physically ill. Not drugs, not money, children. The room suddenly felt colder. Hayes leaned forward sharply. "Why didn't your organization kill Caleb immediately after the shootings?" Mateo answered without hesitation. "Because Denton believed the flash drive vanished with his mother. Then courtroom footage aired nationwide." He looked directly toward Caleb. "Your face reminded someone you survived." Caleb lowered his eyes. Like surviving itself created guilt. Evelyn reached beneath the table and squeezed his trembling hand. The waitress approached nervously then. "Sorry," she murmured. "There's a man outside asking about federal vehicles." Everybody moved instantly. Hayes rushed toward the windows. Black SUV entering the lot. Then another. No government plates. No emergency lights. Mateo stood immediately. "They found you already." Hayes grabbed radios. "Move now." Chaos exploded through the diner. Marshals shoved customers toward kitchen exits, while tires screamed outside across icy pavement. Gunfire shattered front windows seconds later. People screamed. Coffee mugs exploded against walls. Evelyn grabbed Caleb instinctively and dropped behind overturned booths. Glass rained everywhere. Hayes returned fire beside the entrance, while Mateo disappeared through the kitchen corridor. For one terrible moment, Evelyn thought he abandoned them. Then engines roared behind the diner. Motorcycles. Mateo crashed through the rear delivery doors holding spare helmets. Back exit. Hayes hesitated only 1 second. Enough training taught him impossible situations required impossible allies. Snow blasted their faces the moment they escaped outside. Bullets ripped through metal dumpsters nearby. Caleb nearly slipped across frozen pavement. Evelyn caught him instantly. "Keep moving, baby." Hayes fired covering shots while Mateo shoved helmets toward them. "Interstate blocked," he shouted above gunfire. "We use service road south." Evelyn climbed behind Caleb onto the second motorcycle, despite every sane instinct screaming otherwise. Moments later, they tore through snowy backroads outside Nashville, while black SUVs pursued close behind. The world blurred into freezing wind and flashing headlights. Caleb clung tightly against her arms, too tightly, like children holding onto the last safe thing remaining. Gunfire echoed again somewhere behind them. One marshal vehicle crashed violently into roadside barriers. Hayes swerved hard beside them, shouting directions through radio earpieces. Then Mateo suddenly changed course, straight toward abandoned industrial districts near the Cumberland River. Rusting warehouses rose through falling snow like ghosts. Finally, the motorcycle stopped beside an old shipping building, hidden beneath collapsed signage. Mateo killed the engine, breathing hard. "Inside," he ordered. Hayes aimed his weapon immediately. "Why here?" Mateo stared toward the dark river silently. Then he answered the one thing nobody expected. "Because this warehouse belongs to Senator Denton." The warehouse smelled like rust, river water, and old diesel fuel. Snow drifted through broken upper windows, while Nashville's skyline glowed faintly beyond the Cumberland River. Inside, abandoned shipping crates formed narrow corridors beneath hanging industrial lights. Caleb stayed close beside Evelyn. Too close. Like distance itself suddenly felt dangerous. Hayes swept the building carefully with his weapon drawn. Every movement carried military precision. Every shadow looked suspicious now. "You brought us into enemy property," he muttered toward Mateo. Mateo locked the warehouse doors behind them, exactly why nobody searches here first. That logic irritated Hayes because it made sense. Evelyn noticed fresh tire tracks across the concrete floor. "This place isn't abandoned," she whispered. Mateo nodded once. Denton used it years ago for private shipping transfers before federal contracts made him respectable. Respectable. Funny word. America produced dangerous men wearing polished smiles and flag pins constantly. Caleb wandered slowly towards stacked cargo containers near the far wall. Something caught his attention there. Children surviving violence noticed details adults missed. He stopped beside faded symbols spray-painted across rusted metal, a blue heron, small crown above its wings. The boy's face drained immediately. "My mother drew this symbol," he whispered. Everyone turned. Mateo approached slowly. Then his expression changed too. "Impossible," he muttered. Caleb touched the paint carefully. "She used it in notebooks. Said her grandmother believed herons meant people survived storms." He looked toward Mateo nervously. "Why's it here?" Mateo remained silent too long. Hayes noticed immediately. "What aren't you saying?" The former cartel soldier exhaled heavily. "Your mother didn't just collect evidence against Denton," he admitted quietly. "She built escape routes for trafficking victims using old shipping networks." Evelyn felt chills run through her body. Not fear, recognition, women saving children quietly while powerful men destroyed them, the oldest American story imaginable. Mateo continued carefully. This warehouse was part of her system: safe transportation, hidden records, emergency shelters. Shame darkened his eyes. "I helped protect those routes sometimes, before Mercer discovered everything." Caleb looked overwhelmed, because children deserved simpler truths about dead mothers. Hayes lowered his weapon slightly. "You're telling me a cartel insider secretly rescued trafficking victims?" "I'm telling you," Mateo answered. "Good people sometimes survive inside terrible worlds." That sentence lingered heavily inside the warehouse. Around midnight, they discovered Evelyn's cell phone tracking alerts had activated. Someone breached her Birmingham house. Federal cameras captured masked men tearing rooms apart, looking for something. Not her, not Caleb, something else. Evelyn sat heavily against a wooden crate. Her home, the little brick house near the railroads, the kitchen where Caleb first smiled. Destroyed now because she opened her door to one frightened child. Hayes crouched beside her quietly. "I'm sorry." Evelyn surprised herself by laughing softly, not happy laughter, tired laughter. "You know what's funny," she whispered. "I spent 30 years organizing legal records, believing systems protected innocent people eventually." Hayes looked away. Neither believed that anymore. Caleb approached slowly, carrying an old metal box discovered behind shipping crates. "This was hidden under the floor," he said. Inside sat dozens of photographs. Children, hundreds of children, different ages, different cities. Most smiling weakly beside volunteers inside churches, diners, bus stations, safe places, escape places. At the bottom rested one sealed envelope, addressed simply. For Caleb, his hands trembled opening it. Inside waited a letter written in his mother's handwriting. The warehouse disappeared around him while he read silently. Then tears fell onto the paper. Evelyn moved beside him immediately. "What does it say, baby?" Caleb tried speaking twice before words finally came. She knew they'd kill her. His voice cracked apart. "She wrote that if I survived, I needed finding someone kind instead of someone powerful." Evelyn covered her mouth. Caleb kept reading through tears. She said powerful people protect themselves first. Kind people protect others first. He looked directly at Evelyn. "She wrote I'd know the difference when somebody stayed during the hard parts." Nobody spoke afterward, not even Hayes, because exhausted adults carrying old grief sometimes needed reminding too. Then Matteo suddenly stiffened near the loading doors. Engines, multiple, approaching fast. Hayes killed the lights instantly. Darkness swallowed the warehouse. Outside, black SUVs surrounded the building one by one. Too many, far too many. Then a familiar voice echoed through loudspeakers beyond the steel doors. Smooth, confident, political. "Caleb," Senator William Denton called calmly into the darkness. "You have exactly 5 minutes before this situation becomes tragic for everyone inside." Darkness wrapped around the warehouse while snow drifted across the Cumberland River outside. Nobody moved. Senator William Denton's voice echoed again through loudspeakers. "This doesn't need ending violently." Hayes crouched beside broken windows, studying the perimeter carefully. Red laser sights moved across shipping containers outside. Professional teams, military formation, not hired thugs. Evelyn felt cold anger settle deep inside her chest. The senator brought soldiers against a child. Caleb sat beside the metal crate, clutching his mother's letter tightly. His face looked pale beneath the warehouse shadows, but something changed inside his eyes now. Fear remained, but shame disappeared. That mattered. Matteo checked ammunition quietly near the loading dock. "Denton won't leave witnesses tonight," he said. Hayes nodded grimly. "Neither will we." Outside, another voice replaced Denton's, Judge Nathaniel Brooks. "Caleb," the judge called calmly, "you've been manipulated by dangerous people. We can still protect you if you cooperate." Evelyn almost laughed. Protect. Funny word coming from corrupt men hiding behind armed mercenaries. Caleb looked toward the steel doors silently. Then he stood. Hayes grabbed his arm immediately. "Absolutely not." But Caleb surprised everyone. "They're scaredest," he whispered. Nobody answered, because he was right. Powerful people only threatened children when truth frightened them. Caleb unfolded his mother's letter carefully. "She wrote something else," he said softly. Evelyn moved closer. The boy swallowed hard. "She said monsters survive because good people keep hiding from each other." He looked toward Hayes. "Maybe we stop hiding now." Hayes stared at him for several long seconds. Then something shifted behind the marshal's exhausted eyes. Grief, anger, decision. He reached slowly into his jacket and removed a satellite phone. "There's one person left I trust," he muttered. Within minutes, encrypted calls moved across federal channels beyond Denton's network. Hayes contacted internal affairs commanders directly in Washington. No intermediaries, no local offices, no compromised judges. Straight to the top. Meanwhile, outside, Denton's patients disappeared. Massive floodlights suddenly ignited around the warehouse. White beams blasted through broken windows, then engines roared closer, armored vehicles. The senator intended ending this quickly. Matteo positioned himself near the main entrance. "When they breach," he said quietly, "take the boy through eastern tunnels beside the river." Evelyn frowned. "Tunnels?" Matteo nodded. "Old smuggling routes beneath the docks." Hayes checked his watch. "Backup needs 15 minutes. Matteo almost smiled. "Then let's survive 14 first." The explosion shook the entire warehouse. Steel doors blasted inward. Gunfire erupted instantly. Hayes fired first from elevated catwalks, while Matteo moved through shadows with terrifying precision. Bullets shredded crates around them. Evelyn dragged Caleb toward the eastern corridor exactly as instructed. The boy stumbled once. She caught him immediately. "Keep moving, baby." Smoke filled the warehouse fast. Concrete dust rained from the ceiling. Outside, men shouted tactical commands while floodlights swept violently through darkness. Then Evelyn heard something impossible. Senator Denton himself entered the warehouse. "Enough!" His voice thundered above the chaos. Gunfire slowed. Evelyn peeked carefully around a shipping crate. William Denton stood beneath industrial lights, wearing a black overcoat untouched by snow or smoke. Silver hair perfect. American flag pin gleaming beneath his collar, like evil dressed for television. Judge Brooks remained beside him, carrying a handgun with visibly shaking hands. Cowards always shook eventually. Denton's eyes found Caleb instantly. "Son," he called smoothly, "your mother made unfortunate choices. Don't repeat them tonight." Caleb stepped from hiding before anyone stopped him. "She saved kids you sold," he shouted. The warehouse fell silent. Even Denton paused. Caleb's voice shook but continued anyway. "You hide behind flags and speeches while children disappear." Tears streamed down his face now. "You killed her because she told the truth." Denton's polished expression cracked slightly. There, the real man underneath, cold, cruel, cornered. "You know nothing about power," Denton answered softly. Evelyn stepped beside Caleb immediately. "No," she said fiercely, "but he knows something better." Denton looked irritated now. "And what's that, Mrs. Carter?" Evelyn lifted her chin proudly. "Love that stays." For one strange second, silence swallowed the warehouse again. Then distant sirens exploded across the river. Dozens. Federal helicopters thundered overhead. Floodlights shifted suddenly toward incoming armored convoys racing across dock roads. Hayes emerged from smoke-covered catwalks, shouting one sentence. "Federal Internal Affairs, drop your weapons now." Chaos erupted outside. Mercenaries scattered, vehicles reversed violently, but Senator Denton didn't run. Instead, he stared directly at Caleb and smiled. "You think this ends tonight?" he whispered. Then Judge Nathaniel Brooks suddenly raised his handgun. Not toward Caleb, toward Denton. The shot echoed through the warehouse like thunder. The gunshot echoed across the warehouse. Everybody froze. Senator William Denton looked down slowly at the blood spreading across his black overcoat. Judge Nathaniel Brooks stood trembling beneath the industrial lights, smoke rising from his handgun. For one terrible second, nobody moved. Then Denton collapsed hard against the concrete floor. Chaos exploded instantly afterward. Federal agents stormed through shattered entrances while helicopters rattled overhead. Mercenaries dropped weapons beside loading docks. Sirens screamed across the frozen riverfront. Judge Brooks fell to his knees, shaking uncontrollably. "He was going to kill the boy," he whispered repeatedly. "He was going to kill all of us." Hayes ripped the weapon from his hands while internal affairs officers flooded the warehouse. Evelyn shielded Caleb instinctively against the confusion. The boy stared at Denton's body silently. No triumph, no relief, just exhaustion. Because children surviving evil rarely celebrated violence. Matteo stood near the loading doors with blood running down one arm from a grazing bullet wound. Federal agents surrounded him cautiously. Hayes looked toward commanding officers arriving through the smoke. "He helped protect the witness," he stated firmly before anyone asked questions. That surprised Matteo visibly. Maybe redemption always sounded strange when heard aloud. Hours later, dawn rose pale over Nashville while national news exploded across every network in America. corruption, trafficking, federal conspiracies, Senator Denton dead during armed standoff, Judge Brooks under arrest, witness protection failures exposed publicly. The country watched powerful men collapse in real time. Inside a secure federal medical facility, Caleb finally slept peacefully for the first time in months. No nightmares, no sudden panic, just sleep. Evelyn sat beside the hospital bed, knitting badly shaped scarves nobody requested. She learned knitting after chemotherapy treatments years earlier because keeping hands busy helped quiet fear. Hayes entered quietly carrying coffee. Terrible hospital coffee, still comforting. "The drive cracked everything open," he said softly. 37 arrests already. More coming. Evelyn nodded without looking up. "And Caleb?" Hayes glanced toward the sleeping boy. "Federal court approved emergency guardianship this morning." Her knitting needles stopped moving. Slowly, she looked up. Hayes smiled faintly. "Congratulations, Mrs. Carter. Looks like you're officially impossible paperwork now." Emotion hit her so suddenly, she covered her mouth. At 62 years old, after decades of empty rooms and quiet dinners and believing motherhood passed her by forever, Evelyn Carter finally heard the truth she never stopped needing. He was staying. 2 weeks later, they returned to Birmingham. Winter sunlight covered Willow Creek Road, while neighbors gathered nervously beside damaged homes. Federal vehicles lined the street near Evelyn's brick house, windows broken, furniture overturned, front porch railing destroyed. Still standing. Caleb stared silently at the damage. Then something unexpected happened. Mrs. Linda Grayson approached carrying casseroles. Behind her came church volunteers, then construction workers, then neighbors with ladders, paint buckets, replacement windows, lumber. Even people who once whispered behind grocery aisles showed up quietly carrying tools. Evelyn looked overwhelmed. An older mechanic named Walter Jenkins removed his cap awkwardly. "Ma'am," he muttered, "we should have stood beside you sooner." Others nodded silently. Shame moved heavily through the crowd. But Evelyn understood something important. Communities healed exactly like people, slowly, painfully, one honest choice at a time. Repairs lasted 3 days. By the 4th evening, Caleb hung fresh curtains upstairs while neighbors rebuilt the porch together beneath cold Alabama skies. Hayes visited during sunset, carrying one final envelope. Inside rested Mateo Ruiz's statement agreement: full cooperation, reduced sentencing, protection for rescued trafficking victims connected to the warehouse network. At the bottom sat one handwritten note. For the boy, Caleb opened it quietly. "Your mother believed surviving meant becoming gentle after terrible things. Don't waste that lesson. No signature needed." That night, Evelyn and Caleb sat on the repaired front porch, wrapped beneath blankets, while freight trains echoed through Birmingham again. Almost normal, almost peaceful. Caleb looked toward her carefully. "You really want me staying here permanently?" Evelyn laughed softly. "Baby, after armed senators and explosions, you think I'm scared of raising one stubborn 12-year-old boy?" For the first time since entering her life, Caleb laughed loudly. Real laughter, young laughter. The sound nearly broke her heart with gratitude. Then headlights appeared slowly at the end of Willow Creek Road, black government sedan, official plates. Hayes noticed immediately, his expression darkened. Because some storms didn't end, they simply changed shape. The black sedan stopped beside Evelyn's rebuilt porch just after sunset. Cold January wind carried the smell of fresh lumber and distant rain, while neighbors quietly drifted back inside nearby homes. Caleb sat frozen beside Evelyn beneath porch blankets. Hayes stepped off the porch immediately. His posture changed. Alert, dangerously alert. 2 men exited the sedan wearing dark government overcoats. Neither smiled. Both carried the careful confidence of people accustomed to closed rooms and classified conversations. The older man approached first. Silver hair, sharp blue eyes, Washington written across every movement. "Mrs. Carter," he said politely, "my name is Richard Holloway, Department of Justice." Evelyn didn't stand. After everything she survived recently, titles impressed her far less. "That usually means trouble," she answered calmly. To his credit, Holloway almost smiled. "Tonight, hopefully not." He handed Hayes a sealed document: federal authorization, congressional oversight signatures, emergency witness resolutions. Hayes read silently before looking up, stunned. "You're serious?" Holloway nodded. "Very." Caleb shifted nervously beside Evelyn. The boy still expected adults arriving at night to destroy something. Holloway finally faced him directly. "Caleb Mercer, the Department of Justice officially closed your witness status this afternoon. All outstanding threats connected to the Denton organization have been neutralized or detained." The words settled quietly across the porch. Neutralized, detained, over. Could something like this ever truly end? Caleb looked toward Evelyn uncertainly, like permission mattered. Evelyn squeezed his hand gently. "What else?" she asked Holloway. The older man exhaled slowly. "The Attorney General reviewed testimony surrounding Mrs. Carter's involvement during this investigation." His expression softened slightly. "Frankly, Ma'am, several people in Washington believe this country owes you an apology." Evelyn blinked. Nobody apologized to women like her. Not usually. Holloway continued, "Your actions exposed one of the largest trafficking operations in modern Southern criminal history. You protected a federal witness after multiple agencies failed him repeatedly." Hayes looked quietly embarrassed beside the porch railing. The truth hurt sometimes. Then Holloway delivered the final surprise. "Congress approved emergency funding this morning for a national foster protection initiative." He glanced toward Caleb. "They named it the Carter-Mercer Act." Silence swallowed the porch. Freight trains echoed faintly somewhere beyond Birmingham. Evelyn stared at the man like he spoke another language. "You're naming federal legislation after us?" "Yes, Ma'am." Caleb looked overwhelmed, because 12-year-old boys expected survival, not history. Weeks passed afterward. Winter slowly loosened its grip across Alabama while life rebuilt itself piece by piece. Caleb enrolled in middle school under permanent guardianship records, listing Evelyn Carter as his legal mother. The first time he wrote her last name beside his own on homework forms, he stared at the paper nearly 5 minutes, then smiled quietly. Healing looked small sometimes. Evelyn returned to the courthouse too, not as a forgotten clerk, as a consultant helping redesign federal witness support procedures for vulnerable children. Funny how quickly institutions rediscovered value after television cameras arrived. Still, she accepted, because bitterness built nothing. One Sunday morning in early spring, Greater Faith Baptist Church overflowed beyond capacity. Reporters crowded the back walls while families packed every wooden pew. Pastor Lionel Reed invited Evelyn and Caleb forward after service. The congregation stood applauding before either reached the altar. Long applause, the kind carrying regret, the kind carrying gratitude too. Evelyn looked across those familiar faces. Neighbors who once whispered, neighbors who later rebuilt her house. Human beings failed each other constantly, but sometimes they learned better. Pastor Reed smiled warmly. "Mrs. Carter," he said gently, "people keep asking how you stayed brave through all this." Evelyn looked toward Caleb beside her. The boy appeared taller already, safer too. Finally, she answered, "I wasn't brave every day." Her voice remained soft but steady. "Some nights I was terrified. Some mornings I wanted hiding instead." She glanced across the church slowly. But children notice who stays during hard times, and once a child learns somebody truly stays, the world changes for them forever. The sanctuary fell silent. Several people cried openly. Caleb reached for her hand. She held it tightly. That evening, they sat together on the repaired front porch, watching sunset spill gold across Willow Creek Road. No sirens, no helicopters, no gunfire, just Birmingham breathing quietly beneath spring skies. Caleb leaned against her shoulder carefully. "You know what Mum wrote at the bottom of her letter?" he asked. Evelyn shook her head. The boy smiled softly. "She wrote that surviving terrible people means refusing becoming one." He looked toward the fading sunset. "I think you helped me do that." Evelyn felt tears burn her eyes. At 62 years old, after decades believing life passed her by, she finally understood something beautiful. Love didn't arrive according to schedules. Families weren't always born. Sometimes they were chosen during storms. and sometimes staying mattered more than anything blood could ever promise. Across America, people would eventually forget senators and scandals and courtroom headlines. But one frightened boy would always remember the woman who handed him terrible hot chocolate during a storm and stayed afterward. Stayed through danger, stayed through fear, stayed through everything, and in the end, that became the only story truly worth telling. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and share this video.